Hello, Facebook. Happy September. It's definitely cool in the air. I'm happy to have my windows open instead of having to crank the air conditioning so much in my car. And I am back in my car, as some people have dubbed these my car talks. So happy to be back here. I do feel like this is my actual office. So I just want to touch up base again on some of the things that happened this week. As I put in the intro to this, they were touching on climates of various kinds. And the first one is school climate. I was so lucky to have been invited by Emma Johnson of the Northwest Connecticut Prevention Network, NCPN, to participate in a professional development day for Region 1 teachers on last Friday, and particularly with the group guidance counselors who are doing work on social and emotional learning. And as we talked, this to me is the connection of a lot of things that I've worked on at other points in my life. My work with women's support services, in which the work that they do, their counselors do with the youngest kids, is all about social and emotional learning, and taking care of one another and being kind, as the mosaic on the outside of Kent Central School has on it, which is where the session was held. And also work that my husband and I have been involved with through the McCall Behavioral Health and the Foundation for Community Health and NCPN and others about substance abuse, which again, when you're talking about prevention at the earliest level, that is about social and emotional learning. It's about finding other ways to deal with childhood trauma that don't lead you down the path of behavioral challenges and substance abuse. And finally, to me, as I think I've mentioned before, one of the most moving, powerful conferences that I went to when I was in Nashville a few weeks ago was one on state health systems, but in particular, this behavioral economist talking about the just unprecedented social epidemic that we are experiencing right now, and unprecedented in the sense of at a time when the economic indicators, for now at least, are still relatively strong, and yet we are experiencing just unprecedentedly high levels of mental and behavioral health challenges, social isolation, loneliness, connected to obesity, substance abuse, other mental health challenges. And again, at its basic level, this has to do with how we relate to one another, and the kind of work that these guidance counselors are doing at the very earliest levels. And as they movingly talked about, they can see really early on kids who really ought to be having additional support. And if we can invest relatively small amounts of money in those kind of preventative things that can really help those kids have different paths in their life, in addition to it being the right things for those kids, it's also incredibly cost effective. And so it was great to be able to be with all of you, hearing about all the things you are doing. In particular, little things like Lila Wood from North Canaan was talking about that the morning meeting that North Canaan Elementary now has, which just sets the tone for the day in a different way. And instead of people bumping up against each other and being, grouchy for whatever reason, it sets a tone of how we say hello to one another, and we're kind again, and that sort of sets the tone, and is also about behavior. Several of the counselors talked also powerfully about this is less about having a breakout session for half an hour and talking about social emotional learning, even teaching teachers about social emotional learning, than it is about actually acting in certain ways. And it's a reminder, being a parent, it's a whole lot less about what you say and a whole lot more about what you do, because they are watching us all the time. And that means also that we have to take care of our teachers so that they are nourished emotionally and are in a position to help our kids. So I thank all of you who were part of that. I learned a lot, and I look forward to working with you. We did pass a bill this year. It's a public act. I'll put a link to it in the newsletter, 19-166, which is about social and emotional learning, and it sets up a collaborative which is on school climate, social and emotional learning, to set up best practices, and it specifies a pretty wide array of professionals that will be on that collaborative, in addition to redefining bullying in a way that coheres with what we know about bullying today, and sets up better communication requirements and reporting requirements between parents and schools when those issues are present. So I look forward to getting lots of feedback on that collaborative as it moves forward. Also, of course, last weekend was the Goshen Fair, which is always incredibly fun. We had just perfect weather. I wasn't there on Monday. Everybody was afraid it was going to pour rain on Monday, but from where I was in other parts of the district, it did not rain that hard, so I hope Monday was as successful a day as the other 2 days. For me, in particular, the Goshen Fair is an opportunity to, we draw in elected officials from all parts of the state, statewide and federal officials who come. So I was with the governor, with the attorney general, with Senator Blumenthal, and it's just, nice to have them focusing on the northwest corner and to point out all the incredible things that are happening around here, in particular agriculture and agricultural education and the importance of funding that vocational, technical, agricultural education, and seeing the work that the innovative work that our farms are doing, and FFAs, the students, the things, the projects they're working on. So that is always fun, in addition to educational for those that come to our part of the state for that event. The other climate thing is, of course, climate change. You may have read that Governor Lamont signed an executive order this week at a ceremony that I attended, which it revamps the Governor's Council on Climate Change, reinvigorates their mission, expands it, and sets and accelerates the time frame for getting our electrical grid on a zero emissions to its zero emissions goal. Previously, that goal was 2050. This executive order moves that up to 2040. So people were very there's a lot of specific information behind this, a lot of science, a lot of knowledge, both from the nonprofit sector and from a lot of people in government. So that was very exciting to be part of. And it also, includes the council, it's important to note, will include not just scientists, but experts in environmental justice and equity and more community inclusion. So we can make sure that it's clear that this affects everybody in our state and is already affecting businesses and healthcare and all kinds of people across our state. And so that is a really great initiative. I look forward to working on that. In connection with that, I also had a great meeting with Matt McCunis of the Kinetic Green Bank, which I have been familiar with, having been in an earlier life involved in installing a solar field and looking at the various financial incentives for doing that in Connecticut, and understanding that in Connecticut, relative to other states, we can sometimes make it pretty cumbersome. So the Green Bank, just for those of you who may not be familiar, is sorry, I'm reading the messages on the screen, and that's confusing, but thank you. Anyway, it's a quasi-public institution whose focus is on financing clean energy by leveraging public capital with multiples of private capital. So it's very much in line with a lot of things that's happening in Hartford right now, and they're looking for ways to fill in the gaps. In other words, not to replace the private market, but to encourage the marketplace to move into certain areas where it hasn't been, to get that, to provide some seed incentives to get that moving. And I think there's a lot to be gained working with them as we work towards the goal of zero emissions by 2050. I also thank him for making podcast and audiobooks recommendations. I just started listening to Drawdown, which some of you may have read, which is a book about strategies for reducing and turning. Drawdown refers to a point at which we will start to actually remove carbon from the atmosphere and turn global warming and climate change back, rather than just slowing down the pace of change. And it's got a lot of specific strategies in it. And so I started listening to that as I drive around. So thank you, Matt, for that. I also had a great meeting with Torrington Water Company, Susan Suhanovsky. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Susan, the president of the water company, which is not only is it a local business that's experiencing a lot of the challenges that our local businesses are experiencing, but it's a utility in a lot of ways, and it's about water. So that touches on health, safety, cybersecurity, environmental issues, you name it. They have their fingers in a lot of pots, and being there on site with Susan and the people who work there is really powerful, because it's clear that they are really dedicated to what they do, and they want to serve their customers and provide good, clean, sustainable water supply to lots of towns, not just Torrington. So I thank Eric Geddes for setting that up for me. for everyone at Torrington Water for taking the time to walk around with me. Two other sort of corporate kind of news. I'm sure you've read about Walmart, which recently announced that it's going to stop selling certain kinds of ammunition. And in addition to that, is going to lobby for certain reforms in gun safety. And the one that I took particular note of was about researching gun violence as a public health issue so that we can get actual data on what's happening, what's effective, and we can legislate effectively. That effort has effectively been shut down by the gun lobby in prior years, and it's a really critical thing for us to be able to have good information rather than chase down issues that aren't going to be effective in reducing gun violence, which is what I think everybody wants, gun owners, non-gun owners, everyone in our society. So that was a really powerful thing, and Walmart's to be commended for doing that, in my view. But I also want to put that in a context of another article that I've been reading recently, the Business Roundtable, which is a nationwide organization of CEOs, almost 200 CEOs from across the country, the biggest companies in the United States, have recently signed a memo, which I may talk about more going forward. But essentially, what it is suggesting is that it is time for our companies to move away from the model where they only pay attention to shareholder wealth, which has led to a lot of short-term decisions and to some. It's connected to a lot of social inequality, income inequality, and to when you only measure shareholder wealth, that tends to send resources again and again and again more to the investor class and away from working people. And so what this memo, which was supported by the overwhelming majority, and I think there are just over 190 members of the roundtable and over 180 of them signed this, suggesting that we go back to an earlier model, which has companies looking not just at shareholder wealth, but also at stakeholders, other stakeholders in their environment, their suppliers, their customers, their employers, their employees, all kinds of people. And I just wanted to note that it's not that these people have suddenly become philanthropists and have changed what they do for a living. It's because this is good for business. And they want to make this change because this will be healthy for the long-term interests of their businesses. And I think it's a really important thing to be paying attention to. And I see Walmart's announcement in connection with that, as seeing that they have a greater obligation to more than just shareholder wealth in the next quarterly report. One other kudo I want to give at Stop and Shop. You may have read today. I just read in the Republican American today that this is relating to the Connecticut's plastic bag ban, which the bags will be banned, and but for now there's a 10-cent fee until it gets the ban goes into place. And Stop and Shop announced that they're going to take 5 cents from each of that 10-cent fee and from all of their stores in Connecticut and donate it to the Connecticut Fund for the Environment, Save the Sound. And that's a really great thing. And we heard a lot of testimony when we were considering the ban about plastic bags in the Sound and how it affects our waters in Connecticut. And so I just want to highlight Stop and Shop for doing that and thank them, and make sure we all shop there again. Two other little announcements. One, we are now hiring legislative interns. So if you know a student who might be interested, I'll post all the details of this in the newsletter. The deadline for the application is November 1st. So please forward that information and apply. And the last thing I just wanted to note is, as I drive around, I'm sure everyone who's driving around now, we all know people are back in school, but you see kids waiting for the bus. You might get stuck behind a bus, and maybe that bus is making you a little late. But just to take a pause and remember how important safety is here, and to go a little more slowly, look around you, pay attention, and help the school bus drivers keep those kids as safe as possible. So thanks for that, and have a great week. I'm looking forward to going to the Cornwall Ag Fair tomorrow. Maybe I'll see some of you there. See you soon. Bye.